The scream tore through the midnight storm, raw and jagged, like something inside the house had split open. Rain battered the windows as Elias staggered into the dim kitchen, his bare feet slipping on the cold tile. His thin frame shook violently, one hand clutching a yellowed envelope, the other gripping the counter as if it might hold him upright. The children, grown now, yet still strangers to him, stood in the doorway, frozen. He looked at them with eyes sharp as broken glass. "Don't open it," he said, his voice scraping the silence. "Not until I'm gone." His chest heaved, the breath rasping out like sand over stone. A drop of water, rain or tear, slid down his cheek. Outside, thunder rolled, low and unending, while inside the air thickened with something older than the storm. The envelope shook in his grasp, not from the wind, but from the weight of whatever truth it held. In that moment, every regret he had ever buried seemed to stand in the room with them, watching. In the hours before the collapse, Elias had sat alone at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cooling cup of tea he never drank. The rain had started early, tapping at the glass like an impatient guest. He had stared not at the wall, but through it, at something distant, unreachable. "Every man gets 2 lives," he muttered into the steam. "The second begins when he knows there's only one." His voice was steady, but the words carried the weight of a truth that had taken 80 years to form. He traced a finger along the rim of the cup, the porcelain cool beneath his skin, and wondered if his children would ever understand why he had kept certain doors locked. Outside, a gust rattled the window, and the candle beside him flickered, its flame bending low, as if bowing to some unseen presence. Elias remembered the letter's arrival, as clearly as the day his first child was born. The same mix of terror and inevitability had gripped him. The postman had avoided his gaze, leaving it on the step like a cursed thing. He'd picked it up with hands that already knew its weight. Some truths, he told himself, are best carried to the grave. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, he found himself reading it over and over, searching for an angle, a loophole, a way to soften the blow that would come when the seal broke. The ink had faded in places, but the words still burned. It was not the kind of fire that warmed. It was the kind that left nothing standing. When the children were small, they would press their hands against the window, waiting for him to return from the university. He often came home too late, his lectures spilling into dinners with colleagues, his studies swallowing whole evenings. The children would fall asleep at the table, plates untouched, their mother carrying them to bed without a word. He told himself it was for their future, that his absence was an investment. But absence, he would learn, accrues interest in ways no man can repay. Now, seeing them as strangers, he wondered if they remembered him at all, or just the shadow he left behind. That night, before the scream, Elias had opened the envelope for the 100th time. The paper crackled like old bones, the ink bleeding faintly into the fibers. He read the first line and felt the years collapse inward. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the voice he heard between them, the voice of someone long gone, speaking as if from the other side of time. He closed his eyes and saw her face as it was the last day they spoke. The room seemed to tighten around him, air thick with ghosts. He folded the paper with care, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it by the lamp, as if light alone might guard it. Elias had been many things in his youth, a lecturer admired for his brilliance, a friend trusted for his discretion, and a husband praised for his composure. But fatherhood had always felt like a distant shore he could see yet never reach. He loved his children in the way a man loves a country he has never visited, deeply, yet without knowing its streets. His absence was not born of cruelty but of fear, a fear that every tender moment might expose the hollowness he carried inside. "I stayed away because I thought I might break you," he whispered once to the photograph on his desk. But the years proved that absence too can shatter the ones you love, only more slowly. The rain-soaked nights had been filled with his lectures and debates, while their childhood slipped past like shadows on a moving train. In the photograph, the children were frozen in summer sunlight, hair messy from wind, eyes squinting against brightness. He remembered the day well, how he had nearly missed it, rushing from a lecture hall to the park. They had run to him, arms outstretched, laughter spilling like water over stones. He caught them, but the moment was brief. The weight of unfinished work pulled him away too soon. That picture became a shrine on his desk, a relic of the father he wished he'd been. "You smiled like you forgave me," he murmured once to the image. But forgiveness is not always the absence of pain. Sometimes it is the mask that hides it. His wife had been the bridge between him and the children, carrying news of their scraped knees, their school victories, their small heartbreaks. She never scolded him for missing dinner, though her eyes sometimes lingered too long on his empty chair. When she died, the bridge collapsed. Conversations became formal, visits short, the warmth replaced by a polite chill. He could see his absence settling into them like winter frost, crystallizing over years until nothing moved. "I thought I had time," he told himself, "to make it right." But time is not a forgiving thing, it is a debt collector, and it always arrives. After her passing, Elias tried to step into the role she had filled so effortlessly. He cooked once, burning the rice. He asked about school, receiving polite one-word answers. The house seemed to resist him, as if its walls remembered his absence and refused to welcome him back. In the silence he heard echoes of the years he'd traded for lectures, papers, and applause. He began writing letters he never sent, pages filled with apologies and half-explained truths. They piled in a drawer, yellowing at the edges, unsent because he feared they might open wounds too deep to heal. There was one letter he had written dozens of times and never dared to finish. It began with the same words: "I am sorry for the years you lost with me." Sometimes he stopped there, staring at the ink until it blurred. Other times he added fragments, stories of choices he thought would protect them, of sacrifices they never knew. But each draft ended in the same way, torn in half, dropped into the wastebasket like something too dangerous to keep. He told himself they wouldn't understand. The truth was, he feared they would. The rain had a way of making the past louder. Elias sat in the dim light, hearing voices from years ago, his own sharper than, hers steadier, the children's, full of questions he never answered. He remembered the dinner when his eldest had asked why he never came to school plays. The room had gone silent, folks paused in mid-air. "Because my work is important," he had said, but even then he knew it was only part of the truth. The other part was fear of being seen as the man he was at home, stripped of the respect he wore in lecture halls. That fear had ruled his choices until absence became a habit too heavy to set down. The more he stayed away, the harder it was to return. It was not only his own choices that haunted him, it was the whispers that followed them. Colleagues spoke of his brilliance, but neighbors spoke of his coldness. He had overheard them once in the market, their voices lowered but not low enough. Poor children, growing up in that house. He had kept walking chin high, but the words lodged deep, growing sharp with time. He told himself he didn't care. Yet every time he looked at his children, he saw those words in their eyes, unspoken but alive. Silence, he realized, could wound as deeply as any insult. The envelope had not come without warning. For weeks before it arrived, he had felt the shift. An undercurrent in the way his son spoke to him, the deliberate pauses, the way letters stopped arriving. Something was stirring in the shadows of the past, and he had no control over when it would surface. At night, he dreamed of a knock at the door, and when he opened it, the hallway beyond was filled with water, rushing in to drown him. Waking, he would lie still, the image lingering like the taste of metal in his mouth. There had been an incident years earlier, one he never spoke of. A letter misdelivered, a truth glimpsed too soon. It was swept away quickly, but not without consequence. That was when he learned that secrets were like roots. They grew unseen, pushing through walls until the cracks became visible. He built his life around patching those cracks, telling himself he was protecting the ones he loved. In truth, he was protecting himself from the moment they would look at him differently. It was the smallest things that betrayed him. His daughter once asked about a photograph on the mantel. A group of people she didn't know, one woman standing close to him, smiling. She was a friend, he said too quickly, and saw the question deepen in her eyes. That night, he took the photo down, sliding it into a drawer. But the absence left a space, and spaces, he knew, invite speculation. You can hide an object. You cannot hide the shape it leaves behind. The envelope lay between them like a live wire. Elias watched his children with the fear of a soldier holding a grenade he could not throw. "Not yet," Elias said. "But if you must, read it aloud." Aaron lifted the flap with careful fingers, as if gentleness might spare them. Lila steadied the lamp with a shaking hand. The letter began in Elias's tight script, the ink dark and disciplined. "My children, I have failed at telling the truth while I was strong." The air changed as Aaron read. Each word felt like a hinge turning a door no one wanted open. "What I kept from you was not to protect my name. It was to protect yours." Lila's breath hitched. Elias felt the room tilt, memory pressing in. "There is a night I have not spoken of. It has grown teeth in my silence." Aaron paused and looked at his father. Elias said, "Keep going." The courage tasted like metal. "Tonight, I will ask you to hate me less than the lie you were given." The storm outside quieted, as if the weather itself were listening. Aaron read the next lines, his voice thinned by disbelief. "The accident you were told about did not happen as the town remembers." Elias felt the old road rise under his feet again. The rain, the curve, the foolish pride of a scholar who thought wakefulness was wisdom. "I was driving that night," the letter said. "I had lectured too long and refused to sleep." The words struck like cold water. "Thomas warned me to stop." "Ah." "I insisted I was fine." Lila whispered, "Thomas?" Elias said, "My dearest friend." Aaron read on. "When the truck's lights broke over the hill, Thomas grabbed the wheel. He saved us from the ravine and paid with his life." Silence leaned hard on the room. "They said he was drunk. He was not. I let them say it because I could not bear the truth in your eyes." Elias closed his own eyes now. He saw the hospital hallway. He saw the widow's hands. He heard himself promising to carry what he had broken. Lila's voice trembled as she took the page. "I went to Thomas's widow the next morning," the letter said. "She had 2 small children and a silence that could drown a city." Elias felt the floor's old wood under that memory. "I asked her to let me carry you, not as penance only, but as love owed to the man who saved me." Lila swallowed. She agreed on one condition: that I never tell while she lived, because grief loves quiet and children need one story to sleep. Lila stopped. Tears hung without falling. "We were not yours," she said softly. Elias said, "You were mine in every way I knew." Aaron's jaw tightened. The letter continued. "Aaron, Lila, you are Thomas's children. He was brave, and he was kind, and he died clean." The words landed like bells. Their names felt different in the air. The house listened for the next sound and found only breath. Aaron stood so quickly the chair scraped a harsh line across the tile. "You let them spit on his name," he said. His voice did not shake. That was worse. Lila pressed her palm to the letter, as if to stop the words from escaping. Elias looked at his son and saw the man he might have been if truth had come sooner. "I carried what I could," Elias said. "I failed where it mattered." Aaron's mouth hardened. "You hid behind nobility and called it sacrifice." Elias nodded once. "Yes." Lila said, "Why didn't you trust us with grief?" Elias searched for the answer he had practiced for years, and found only the simplest one. "I was afraid of losing you," he said. "And in choosing fear, I lost you anyway." The lamp hummed. The rain softened. Something old had shifted its weight and was waiting to see who would fall. Aaron sank back into the chair like a man remembering how to breathe. Lila traced the margin of the letter with a fingertip, as if mapping a coastline that had always been there. "He saved you," she said. Elias nodded. "He saved me, and I failed to save his name." The next lines waited. "There is one more truth you must have now." Elias felt the tremor begin in his hands. "I married his widow because I loved her kindness, and I loved you. I stayed distant because I believed my nearness would break the seal on a grief you were not ready to face. Aaron shut his eyes. Lila said, "We were ready for love." Elias said, "I did not know love could mend what truth had shattered." The last sentence of the page looked back at them. "If you can, forgive the cowardice of a man who feared the light." The room held its breath. The next page waited like a cliff's edge. Aaron's voice was rough, the way a rope frays under strain. "You hid the truth, and it rotted in the dark." Elias nodded, not to agree but to acknowledge the wound. "I thought silence was shelter," Elias said. "It was only a roof that leaked." Lila's hands curled into her lap, knuckles pale. "Do you know," she said quietly, "how many nights I asked why you never looked at me the way other fathers did?" Elias closed his eyes. "I did look. I just thought I wasn't allowed to." The words lay between them, bare and unarmored. The lamp's light caught in the dampness of Lila's eyes, a reflection of something fragile but not yet broken. Outside the rain hesitated, a softening of the relentless drumming, as if even the storm understood that what came next would decide what could be saved. Aaron rose and paced the narrow space between the table and the counter. "Thomas deserved to be remembered for what he did, not buried under a lie," he said. Elias followed him with his gaze. "He deserved more than I gave him," Elias replied. "So did you." Aaron stopped, turning with the slow precision of someone holding back a flood. "And now you want, what, forgiveness?" Elias shook his head. "No, only that you know the truth before I leave." The word, leave, landed heavily, shifting the air. Lila's eyes darted to his hands, the tremor she'd noticed earlier now unhidden. She realized he had been telling them this not as a man seeking absolution, but as one preparing for a final departure. Lila reached across the table, her fingers hovering before they touched his. "You should have told us sooner," she said, the words carrying both ache and relief. Elias looked at her hand resting over his. "I thought the truth would steal what little I had left of you," he said. "It gave us less," she answered. Aaron returned to the table, his chair scraping against the tile like a reluctant admission. "I can't undo the years," Elias said, "but I can give you every piece I still hold." He gestured toward the remaining pages of the letter. "It's all there." For the first time, neither of them moved to read. The moment hung, the letter waiting, the air thick with the weight of what had already been spoken. The next page began with only one line, "There is no time left to wait." Elias drew a breath, steadying himself. "The doctors say weeks," he said, voice soft but clear. Lila's fingers tightened on his. Aaron's face hardened, but not in anger, more like a man bracing for an impact he can't avoid. "So, you wanted to die with this secret?" Aaron asked. "I wanted to die with you still believing I had protected you," Elias said. "But you were protecting yourself," Lila replied. Elias didn't argue. "Yes," he said simply. The honesty landed heavier than denial ever could. Clock ticked somewhere in the house, each second pushing them closer to the end of something none of them could name. Elias's voice thinned, the words dragging against the air. "If I could walk back that night, I would take the wheel from myself and give Thomas the road." Lila's tears finally fell, not for what was lost, but for what had been hidden. Aaron's jaw unclenched, and for the first time he looked at his father without the shield of anger. "I can't promise forgiveness," Aaron said, "but I can promise to remember him the way you should have led us." Elias's shoulders lowered, the smallest release of a lifetime's weight. "Then I've done something right," he said. The rain outside eased into a soft patter, the storm's fury spent. But inside, the reckoning still settled, shaping the night into something they would never forget. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the windows beaded with pale light. Elias sat at the table, the letter's final page unfolded before him. Aaron and Lila were silent, their faces softer but unreadable. "I don't ask for what I don't deserve," Elias said. "I only hope you'll carry the truth without letting it poison what's left." Lila's gaze lingered on him. "The truth changes everything," she said. "But," It also explains everything. Aaron nodded once, not as a gesture of forgiveness, but of understanding. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the fragile quiet. For the first time in decades, he felt no need to rehearse what he would say if they asked about the past. Aaron leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "We'll tell people what really happened," he said. "We'll put his name back where it belongs." Elias swallowed hard. "That's more than I ever did for him." Lila reached for the envelope, sliding it into her bag. "The truth won't heal the past," she said, "but it might keep us from repeating it." Elias nodded slowly, the weight in his chest shifting, not gone, but lighter. "Then you've already done better than I have," he said. The morning light caught on his pale hair, giving him a fragile halo. Later, they moved to the living room. The fire was small, the kind that keeps company rather than chases cold. Elias sank into the armchair, a blanket over his knees. Lila sat beside him on the couch, Aaron in the chair opposite. "You've spent a lifetime guarding a door," Lila said. "Now it's open. What will you do?" Elias smiled faintly. "Watch who walks through." Aaron looked at him, and for the first time, the gaze carried neither accusation nor avoidance. It was simply two men seeing each other. Elias spoke slowly, his voice worn but steady. "Every lie I told was to protect something I thought was fragile, but it turns out, truth can survive more than I imagined." Lila's hand rested on his arm. "You taught us what not to do," she said. Aaron added, "And what still matters." Elias nodded. "Then maybe I haven't failed entirely." Outside, the world was brightening, the wet earth shining under the sun, as if even the ground understood that storms pass, but the shape they leave behind stays. The conversation drifted into silence, not the heavy kind, but the kind that comes when there is nothing left to defend. Elias leaned back, eyes closing, letting the warmth of the fire and the closeness of his children settle into him. "Whatever you do," he murmured, "don't let the fear of loss keep you from the risk of love." Aaron glanced at Lila, and she nodded. It was not a promise they spoke aloud, but one they understood. The clock ticked in rhythm with the new quiet, a reminder that time was still moving, and for now, they were moving with it. Morning arrived like a held breath finally released. Elias woke before the others, listening to a house that felt lighter than it had in years. He asked for the window to be opened, and cool air drifted in with the scent of wet earth. "I never feared dying," he said softly. "I feared dying a stranger." Lila sat beside him, smoothing the blanket over his knees with careful hands. "You are not a stranger," she said, and the words seemed to settle into his bones. Aaron brewed tea and carried it in with a steadiness that surprised him. "We'll speak his name," Aaron said, and Elias pressed his palm to the cup as if to memorize its warmth. "Then, I have work left in the world," Elias answered, and for a moment the years between them did not feel like a wall, but a bridge finally walked. By noon they were at the small-town office, a place that smelled of paper and long opinions. Aaron handed the clerk the letter, his voice firm without anger. "We are correcting the record," he said, and the phrase sounded like a key turning. Lila signed a statement with careful strokes, each signature a refusal to keep carrying the wrong grief. Elias waited in the car, watching the door, counting their heartbeats as if time could be made obedient. When they returned, Lila held up the stamped copy. "It's filed," she said. Elias exhaled. "Then Thomas will be clean where it matters." Aaron nodded. "In memory," he said. Elias looked at his son and saw a man who had learned to lift a name the way some men lift stones. That evening, they drove to the cemetery where Thomas lay under a plain stone that had carried a rumor too long. The air was clear, the sky rinsed of storm, the kind of blue that makes every promise look possible. Aaron knelt and brushed grit from the engraved name. "You saved him," he said quietly. "We will say that from now on." Lila placed a small sprig of rosemary on the grass. "For remembrance," she whispered. Elias stood with effort, hands shaking not from fear, but from a tenderness he had not allowed himself. "Thank you, old friend," he said. "You gave me a family, and I learned to deserve it too late. The wind moved gently, like a hand over sleeping hair, and silence answered with mercy rather than judgment. Night settled, and Elias asked to sit by the window one last time. The house hummed with small sounds, kettle clicks, pages turning, the soft percussion of ordinary life returning. I feared aging because I mistook it for judgment, he said. But it is only a ledger. It writes what you bring. Lila rested her head against his shoulder. Aaron watched them, and something unclenched in his chest that had been clenched since childhood. If we had known, Aaron began, and then stopped, because the sentence had nowhere to go. Elias smiled, thin and bright. You know now, he said. That is the only tense love understands. The moon rose, the room silvered, and the past did not vanish, but it gentled its teeth. Toward dawn, Elias drifted and woke and drifted again, each breath a tide that returned more softly. He asked for the letter, and Lila placed it in his hands. Read just the last line, he said. Aaron read, voice steady. Let the truth make us kin, not ruins. Elias nodded, the motion small but complete. Then I am ready, he said. They stayed with him as light gathered at the edges of the curtains. He looked at his children and found no strangers anywhere in the room. Remember this, Elias said. Age is not a thief. It is a witness. His eyes settled. Silence came, but it was the tender kind. And the house learned a new quiet that did not hurt to hear.